And welcome back to the third and final of our video series on harmonic rhythms and listening to harmonies. So we left off in video number 2. We were bringing up the concept of cadences. A cadence is a spot where the music pauses or comes to a stop. There are several factors that go into that. There are melodic factors. The melody comes to a resting point. The rhythm in the meter. Often there's a speeding up and then a slowing down. There may be a rest after the cadence. Cadences often happen in metrically strong areas, and there's even something called hypermeter that we'll talk about in the future. And cadences tend to happen fairly periodically, much of the time. And then what we're going to talk about today, there's a big harmonic factor that goes into cadences and tonal music. And so let's talk about cadences as they relate to our harmonic functional areas, because cadences happen as we move through a cycle. So let's pop up our little magic window here about cadences. There we go. All right, so our two main type of cadences that we tend to talk about are authentic cadences and plagal cadences. Now you see where our functional areas were really useful, because an authentic cadence involves the moving back from an authentic functional area back to our tonic functional area. Currently, we know one authentic chord, we know our 5 chords, and so when our 5 chord comes back to 1, if that happens with the harmonic, melodic, rhythmic, and metric components that we talked about, we refer to that as an authentic cadence. You'll hear the bass go sol, do. The do, fa, sol. You hear the sol one, you come back to do. And there's our authentic cadence bass line. A plagal cadence is when we move from the plagal function back to the tonic function. This happens a lot in pop music. A lot of pop music will start off on the tonic area, and instead of going tonic, plagal, authentic, tonic, do, fa, sol, back to tonic, do, it'll kind of move the other direction. Do, especially, we'll just do do, sol today. Do, sol, fa, do. And moving that fa back to the do then. That's our plagal cadence at the end of that particular motion. You'll hear that fa do in the bass. The 4 chord, therefore, moving back to the tonic chords. Subdominant back to tonic, 4 to 1. There's our plagal cadence. Those are our two main types of cadences, authentic and plagal. There are several types of authentic cadences. Let's dig into those in a little bit in depth. There we go, types of authentic cadences. So our perfect cadence is like the perfect authentic cadence, or PAC for short, is like the strongest possible way to end a phrase of music. It's a good way to end a piece of music for that matter. It's an authentic cadence, so you've heard the sol do and the bass. We call that sol do a bassizans, by the way. This is the technical term. And the melody will come down, and have you ever noticed how melodies tend to end like do, do, so, la, la, so, fa, fa, mi, re, do. And the melody tends to end coming down the scale like that. That re, do is a great way to make a melody sound like it ended. And in fact, we have a special term for that. The re, do is what we call a tenorizans. I like to remember it because a tenorizans, tenor, re, zans. If you think of the re in the middle of tenorizans, it's not actually re, but think of it that way, and it'll help you remember. Tenorizans goes re, do. It's a great way to end a melody. Sometimes a melody will dip down and come back up. I could have decorated my Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Fa, fa, mi, re, ti. Hear that ti whine to resolve back to ti, to. And so a melody can also end ti-do in a perfect authentic cadence, and it sounds very nice, very finished. The ti-do, of course you know, is our cantizans, is the official name. And I like to remember that cantizans involves ti-do because it's the cantizans. And so you have the ti to the do, and there's our cantizans. If the melody ends with a re do, tenorizans, or a ti-do, cantizans, above the sol do in the bass, the bassizans, we refer to that particular cadence as being a perfect authentic cadence, or PAC for short. Now, an imperfect authentic cadence is any time that our authentic resolves back to our tonic in a cadential location, that those things aren't true. Often, the melody will end on mi instead of ending on do, and that makes it sound not quite as finished. Do, do, sol, la, la, sol, fa, fa, mi, re, mi. You hear it sounded finished, but not as finished as when it ended re, re, do. And so it's not perfect. Or fa, mi. That was terrible. Let's try that again. Do, ti, do, re, mi, fa, mi. There it is. Yeah, we keep the bloopers in these videos. We're very real. Just like in the classroom, we make mistakes in the classroom. You guys make mistakes. Making mistakes is part of learning. We just go back and fix them again. So the fa, mi, or the re, mi. Those are ways to end a melody, but not sound final like it does when it ends on do. If you have those, we have what's called an imperfect authentic cadence, or IAC for short. Something that can happen in an IAC, if I've got that melody ending on the fa, mi, and the bass, instead of going sol, do, goes ti, do. That's a special type of IAC called a comma. You don't need to know that for your inquisitive exercises for this chapter, but it is good to know because it ties into our written theory terminology. By the way, that fa, mi, of course, is what we call an altissonance. The re, mi is an alternative version of the tenor resonance. It has that re, so it's still tenoresonance, but it's not a final tenoresonance. It's an imperfect tenoresonance. The last thing I can do with my half cadence is I can make it sound like you want it to resolve, and then I just leave you hanging, just like when I cut off halfway through my sentence there. Music can do that as well. You know, if I'm going through my harmonic functional cycle, do, fa, sol, do, and I don't resolve, do, fa, sol. You hear it never came back to the do. It didn't resolve back to tonic. I ended on the authentic area. We call it a half authentic cadence because I left it hanging halfway through. It's an open harmonic concept, not a closed harmonic concept. It sounds inconclusive, not conclusive. Similarly, if my melody comes down and I end my melody halfway through that tenoresonance or halfway through that cantissonance, it doesn't resolve. Do, do, sol, sol, la, la, sol, fa, fa, mi, mi, re, re. Yeah, you hear it. It totally didn't resolve. It left you hanging. It had that half cadence feel to it. Or sol, fa, mi, re, do, ti. Again, it's leaving you hanging. So we call it a half cadence. Technically short for half authentic cadence, but outside of pop music, we don't deal a lot with half plagal cadences, which is where I leave you hanging on the plagal function. So we've tended to just use half cadence to refer to half authentic cadences. HC for short. Oh, and plagal cadence we should talk about. Karpinski abbreviates that PC. All right, so let's go to our inquisitive and see how we use our knowledge of cadences and how functional areas relate to cadences to identify this in music. So to our inquisitive. All right, so this one has a musical example. There are two phrases. A phrase is a piece of music that ends in a cadence. So we're going to listen to it and we're going to identify our cadences. Listening to our bass is going to help us hear our harmony. Knowing our harmonic functional areas and resolutions are going to help us know what type of cadences they are. I might need to listen to the melody to identify whether it's a perfect authentic or an imperfect authentic, but the bass will tell me an awful lot. So let's take a listen. You know, it was easiest for me to hear that cadence at the end. That second phrase, did that piece of music sound like it resolved all the way? Or did it kind of leave you wanting more? Da-dum-bum, and on that bass note, sing down to hit do, yum, bum, bim, bum, bum. All right, so we know that the bass ended on a sol at the end. That means we definitely ended on an authentic half cadence. So our second cadence is going to be a half cadence. Now it wants me to drag them in the correct order, so we've got to get our first cadence before I can drag that half cadence in. So let's take a listen one more time. Did you hear where the cadence was? There was a pause. Let's grab what was happening in the bass right at that point. re, ti, do, ti, do. Ah, my bass resolved to a do. And the T, we haven't talked about it yet. We'll talk about it next week in our lessons. But T, like sol, has an authentic function. In fact, we referenced it in our comma, didn't we? The comma had a T-do. It was a type of authentic cadence. Ti, re, ti, do. I'll bet the melody had a fa mi over the top of that T-do, by the way. The melody was moving all sorts of places all over the place. But the fact that I had that T-do means I already know that I had some type of a comma situation going on, which is a type of imperfect authentic cadence. If I'd had sol-do, then I would listen to that melody and see if it had a re-do or T-do to give me a perfect authentic. So I think we have imperfect authentic cadence, correct, followed by our half cadence at the end. Also correct. Yeah, absolutely. By the way, a hint, because there are structures that tend to involve cadences following one after another. It's one of the most common pairs of cadences is to have a half cadence followed by a perfect authentic cadence. HC, PAC. That's what we call a period in music. Let's go back to our camera to talk about this. Yeah, so period in music is where I have a half cadence followed by a PAC. You'll probably hear several of those as you're working through your inquisitive exercises. Generally, we like to move from weak cadences to strong cadences. So the half cadence is weaker than the perfect authentic cadence. Imperfect cadences tend to be weaker than half cadences. So we just saw one where we moved from an IAC, very weak cadence, into a half cadence, which is stronger than an IAC, but not as strong as a PAC. So you'll often see those kind of pairs of cadences working together. All right, that kind of introduces us to harmonic rhythm. Go ahead and do your inquisitive exercises and check in on the forums if you need to ask questions there. And we'll see you again with Aural Theory in a couple of days.